Man City are screwed. A few weeks back I made a video about whether Man City were in a crisis or not, and after the news that broke yesterday, it looks a whole lot more likely that they are, and right now it's very unclear as to how easily they'll be able to get out of it. Now, if you're a super rich football club, you can probably get away with doing one naughty thing. 2 naughty things and you're probably still fine. 10 naughty things and you're probably starting to annoy everyone. Man City did over 100 naughty things. Yeah, probably not the greatest idea. This is the story of how Man City found themselves in this position. Now, before I explain exactly what Man City have done, let me go over a quick timeline of the club and particularly their ownership. If we rewind to the early 2000s, we can see that Man United had managed to turn themselves into arguably the biggest club in the world, having been the first team in the top 5 leagues to ever win the treble, as well as growing a massive global fan base. However, just down the road we can see a Man City side, viewed as one of the biggest clubs in the country, having become a yo-yo team, seeing 3 relegations and 3 promotions between 1996 and 2002, with them even dropping as low as the 3rd division for the first time in their history. City were well known for a strong fan base, which were even selling out crowds in the 3rd tier of football at their iconic Main Road Stadium, before they would then move ground in 2003 to the stadium now known as the Etihad. This stadium move came in the middle of a rough period of ownership at the club, which had seen ex-player Francis Lee buy the team, where he claimed he'd jump off one of their stands if he got them relegated. They were then relegated. By 1999, Sky had purchased shares in the club, as well as seeing every British 14-year-old's favourite shop, JD, having their founders also buy a stake in the side, becoming their largest shareholders. And over the next few years, their chairman would resign, they'd struggle to stay as a consistent Premier League side, and Joey Barton even starred for them. Joey Barton. To be fair, he's far from the worst player to ever play for Man City, but given he was their top scorer in 06-07, you can see that the club were not in the greatest position. However, come the end of the campaign, and Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra then took control of the club. Finally, Man City fans had something to be excited about, as a super rich owner had come in and was ready to save the day. Nah, just joking. He would then see his £800 million fortune frozen by the Thai authorities, who were looking to put him in jail for corruption, with the club left in a very tricky situation. Now, before I go any further, I just need to ask you guys something. In my recent Chelsea video, I mentioned that the majority of people watching actually aren't subscribed, despite the fact that YouTube is telling me that you're returning viewers, so please just click the button as it's a win-win for everyone. Even feel free to take time to pause the video now and click subscribe. Okay, back onto the vid. The Thai millionaire would then try to sell minority stakes in the club, to no avail, as anybody looking to purchase wanted a larger number of shares, before finally on the 1st of September 2008, a consortium from Abu Dhabi bought the club, spearheaded by Sheikh Mansour and Khaldun Al Mubarak. They came in with high expectations, aiming for a top 4 finish within the next 3 seasons. And then, with just minutes left of the transfer window, Man City were able to seal a British record deal for Robinho, splashing £32.5 million on a Brazilian, hoping that it would be enough to improve upon their greatest ever Premier League finish of 8th place. It wasn't. Now, of course, during the January transfer window of this season, City would spend. However, according to reports, the £36 million splashed by the citizens during this window is not the issue. It's what follows from the 09-10 season onwards. So let's just cover that. 09-10, arguably City's most iconic summer transfer window of all time, saw Adebayor, Tevez, Santa Cruz, Lescott, Vieira and more all join across the season, costing well over £130 million combined, with the club only receiving about a tenth of that back in fees, as well as missing out the Champions League by 3 points. However, with the FFP coming into place in 2011, this spend in the transfer window is not the important thing. It's actually the appointment of Roberto Mancini mid-season which saw the club's first breach, something I'll get back onto later. The next year they splashed out over £140 million on the likes of Balotelli, Touré and Silva amongst others, as Mancini guided them to a 3rd place finish, securing their Champions League goal of a few seasons previously, but most importantly more financial freedom ahead of UEFA's FFP rules coming in for the next season. Clichy, Savic and Aguero were all bought in July 2011, soon followed by Samir Nasri just days before the window closed, leading to some Arsenal fans having a particular distaste to the winger. However, the Frenchman would not care, as in the most dramatic of circumstances, Man City were able to end their league title drought of over 40 years with 2 last-minute goals, as Mancini celebrated his 2nd trophy in 2 full years as City manager. Following this success, Man City were able to tempt Ferran Soriano to join the club as CEO, the same man who'd managed to lay foundations for Barcelona's success in the 2000s and early 2010s, who funnily enough would then sack Mancini a year later. Yet again, this is a key moment for Man City, which I'll get back onto later, so I'll gloss over the next few years to get to the interesting bit. As I mentioned, Mancini would be sacked at the end of the 2012-13 season, with the Community Shield being their only success, as Pellegrini then followed, where we'd see City spend £375 million from Mancini's final season all the way through to Pellegrini's final one 3 years later, as the club lifted 4 major honours alongside the rise of the City Group, enough to tempt Pep Guardiola to Manchester, which is where our story gets interesting again. In Guardiola's first year at City, the club spent £167 million, however was still unable to win any silverware, finishing in third and even being knocked out in the last 16 of the Champions League by a young Monaco side featuring a certain Kylian Mbappe. This then promoted an even larger £272 million spend for the 2017-18 season, which would obviously then be enough for them to make history by becoming the first Premier League team to ever reach 100 points. However, behind the scenes, this success may just have caused a world of trouble for the blue side of Manchester. If we take a look at the key players from this 2017-18 season, the likes of De Bruyne, Ederson, Bernardo Silva, Sterling, Walker, Sane, Gundogan, Jesus and more were all bought in the 3 seasons previously, where City spent nearly £600 million, reportedly breaching the Premier League's already lenient rules on profit and sustainability, which is a perfect segue back to Roberto Mancini. As you'll remember, Mancini's arrival was very successful for City. It saw them break various long waits for silverware, but more importantly set them up for the future. See, by the time the Italian arrived in England, he'd already won 9 major honours as a manager in Italy, having coached the likes of Vieira and more importantly Balotelli. Not only this, but given how much of a big name he was, City were now able to sign far more high profile players, which of course not only won them the Premier League and FA Cup, but also obviously allowed them to qualify for the Champions League for the first time since its name change, which helped them to originally get round UEFA's new FFP rules. Now, as you remember, in 2020, we saw Man City barely get away with breaching UEFA's FFP rules over the years, even being fined, and so you can only imagine how much worse it would have been without Mancini's success in guiding them to Europe 4 times in 3.5 years. Well, funnily enough, none of that happened legally. According to the Premier League's investigation, Mancini was reportedly paid twice by Man City, or more so by the group which owned them, as his £1.5 million salary at Man City was more than doubled through him earning an extra £1.75 million a month as a consultant with Abu Dhabi side Al Jazeera, who are controlled by, you guessed it, Sheikh Mansour. Not only this, but if you put it into further context, this cheating from Man City with Mancini is what went on to allow their success in recent years. See, as I spoke about earlier, the success under Mancini was a big factor in bringing Ferran Soriano to Manchester, who played the biggest role in setting up the City Group, something I'm sure everyone watching will be familiar with. Not only this, but Soriano was the man to hire Pellegrini, who was able to oversee a successful transitional period between Mancini and Guardiola, where the stature and nature of the club behind the scenes changed massively. We saw them spend heavily on a new training complex which partnered with a big 2015 summer spend. The growing City Group and even just Soriano being at the club was enough to tempt Pep Guardiola to join. And what was all of this started off by? The arrival of Mancini over a decade beforehand. The same arrival which we now know to be extremely dodgy and has resulted in a significant portion of the 100 plus charges we see City facing now. Moving back onto the huge £600 million spend between 15-16 and 17-18, and we can see another of the determining factors on why the citizens are in so much trouble. Now of course, we've seen other teams spend massive amounts of money in a short time frame. However, this is normally cancelled out through income, whether that's through merchandise sales, selling players, sponsorships, etc, etc. The problem is, Man City didn't do any of this. In terms of merchandise sales, Man City simply don't have the global appeal of their rivals Man United, for example, whose huge fan base worldwide often help offset any financial issues. And in terms of transfer fees, they sold just 2 players for over £20 million between 2015 and 2017, something they matched or more often exceeded 12 times, proving just how unsustainable their transfers actually were during this time. Most notably though is their sponsorships, which have been causing such huge issues and have been brought up a lot. From inflating valuations to being sponsored by reported pyramid schemes, Man City will be under heavy scrutiny in the coming weeks. Most importantly though, when the Premier League were trying to do investigations on topics like their sponsorship, City are believed to have used delaying tactics in order to try and stop and slow down their investigations to try and get out of any trouble. There is one big problem with that strategy though. It kind of breaks one of the most important rules that teams have to agree with in order to play in the Premier League. Now let me simplify everything before I conclude. Man City are basically being charged with breaking various financial rulings, the most well known of which being FFP. See, they wanted to get around FFP rules which were hindering their ability to spend as much as they wanted, which can be done in 2 ways, by either inflating your earnings or hiding your outgoings. And between 2009 and 2018, Man City used both of these tactics. Making this even worse, they then got in the way of the Premier League's investigation of these topics, which has led to even more charges being placed upon them in a trial which has taken over 4 years to acquire evidence. And so to conclude, what does this actually mean for Man City? Well, firstly, they're going to be punished. Whether that's in hefty finings, point deductions, etc., we don't know yet, as the case will be going to trial in an independent court, where even if City lose, they'll most likely use their right to appeal, which will prolong this process even further. Now, it's highly unlikely they'll be stripped of any former titles, but it is in the club's best interest to not spend too heavily for the time being, as they're under so much scrutiny. The problem with this, though, is that they're in a desperate need of rebuild of sorts, as in a couple years' time, most of their star players will have passed their peak, and we may start to see a situation like that of Liverpool or Chelsea, something I've spoken about a lot on this channel in the last month or so make sure you check out those videos. Now, I don't want to delve too much deeper into the topic or do any predictions that I may have, as it's likely that a lot more information will come out in the coming days, and so I want to leave it open for a future follow-up video. That being said though, I will say that despite the fact I don't think City will lose any former titles, I do think that the problems that will arise from this case could hinder them from future success. And with rumours of Pep Guardiola starting to lose patience at the Etihad, there's a small chance that this could be the beginning of the end for the dynasty we expected to see in the blue half of Manchester. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you did, but most importantly, comment what you want me to cover next. Make sure you also follow my Twitter, link in description, as I'll be very active on there in the near future. But for now, enjoy your day.